From Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 192. It's week 17 of 2025. I'm Alexander Leibner, and this is the Sandton Times Hour. A special welcome to you if you're listening for the very first time, online or on air, as well as if you're part of the Sandton Times Hour Nation in Johannesburg, Pretoria, across South Africa, or everywhere or anywhere else in the world. I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land, and I always like to hear from you, so do take this opportunity to get in touch if you can move after all those hopefully epic Easter weekend meals. You can do so by emailing editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media at Sandton Times, or hop onto the website www.sandtontimes.co.za, or use the WhatsApp line 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866, and feel free to use that to send through your voice notes, text messages, videos, and so much more. Here's an example of one that we got this past week from Andre. He popped us a text on the WhatsApp line, and he says, the Discovery Visa report sounds interesting. Now, that was the interview we did with Hilton Kellner from Discovery Bank, right? That was at Spend Trend 2025. So Andre says, the report was interesting. I must get it and study it. The Sandton Times Hour, always worth staying on the couch for. And that's some great feedback, Andre. And thanks so much for sending that through. And I hope you've got a cup of tea, much like myself. I think this is, what is this, hibiscus and something else that looks really exotic, ready to get us through the next hour and to keep us warm and to keep that voice sounding fresh. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to the Sandton Times Hour on all leading digital audio channels, and hopefully you had a chance to do so on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Iona FM, and so many more, especially if you were traveling over the long Easter weekend. Maybe you had some chance to catch up on some previous interviews, some interviews you hadn't heard. It's good to have going forward in case you are going to miss it one of these weeks. At least you can catch up. Joining me on the team behind the mixing desk, someone who also clearly had too many Easter eggs, is Vincenzo. You got those great Italian chocolates, didn't you? I know you. Those Ferrero Rochers and Kinder Chocolade. And what else do they do? Oh, yeah, the Raffaello. I'm not a big fan of Raffaello, I must say. I'm not a coconut person, but yeah, the Italians know how to do chocolates, let me tell you. Boy, I'm sure you probably absolutely made a feast of it this weekend. And I hope it was a family fun, faith-filled weekend. Now it's time to digest all of that. The next couple of weeks are going to be maybe a little bit leaner than this past weekend. Tonight's show is a bit of a mixed bag of things, but, you know, we want to ease you into a short week. One of many, actually, on the horizon. This is a bit like that December period, where it's just one short week after another. I think it's another, the next 3 weeks? 3-4 weeks, right? It's 4-day work week, so either people are not going to be in the office, or it's just going to be one of those where you're going to have to wait for people to respond once they're back from a trip or a holiday. Speaking of which, I'm actually going to be heading off for a few days, off to Paris. Well, the show continues, with me present or not, but I'll be sure to bring back some interesting tips, experiences, and of course findings for you if you've ever wanted to make that trip to Paris, to France. Well, back to business. What are we doing this week? What's in that mixed bag that I've promised you? Well, in a bit, I'll be chatting to one of South Africa's most well-known comedians who struck gold at the Comics Choice Awards this year, so stick around for that chat. Then we talk about all things faith-based and entertainment with our regular commentator, and how these two worlds have merged of late, and how faith-based cinema and faith-based streaming has become very popular amongst those of the faith and those who are essentially non-religious. But we're going to get some more information on that in just a bit. And finally, a tragic incident that unfolded in Sandton has gone viral online. A very troubling video, but it has garnered a lot of attention, and I'll be joined by an eyewitness to this entire incident who will share her story. So that's certainly going to be very interesting as well. All this and more up next in the Sandton Times Hour this week.
Show some love.
Subscribe, share
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour.
on your favorite podcast app now.
It's a good question because lots of people have asked us that, what are you going to do going forward?
That's a great question.
Two critically important questions.
Such a great and interesting question.
I have not even thought about that until you've just said it.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So when the laughter finally settled after the 12th annual Savanna Comics Choice Comedy Awards, one name echoed louder than the rest, and that's Robby Collins, taking home not one but two of the night's most coveted accolades for Best Solo Show for his riveting Come As You Are tour, and of course also headliner of the year. And Robby firmly cemented his place among South Africa's great comedians, from Durban stages to international tours, and now center spotlight at SA's biggest comedy night. I'm excited to be joined by a man whose humor hits hard and lingers long after the applause fades. Let's get into our chat with the one and only Robby Collins. And Robby, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Robby, let's rewind a bit and go back to your early days in comedy. How did you get into comedy?
To be all honest, I dropped out of high school. One being that I thought I'd be a comedian, and I read an interview of another comedian, Robin Williams, who did not finish school. And I decided that's how you become a comedian. And I had a serious conversation with my mother that I don't need to get a matric because that's not what comedians need. From there, I joined the theater. Later, I realized that you still need to get educated to be a comedian. But that was literally how I became a comedian.
But I have a feeling that this conversation with your mother didn't go as smoothly as that, or did it?
Oh, not at all. My mom's a teacher as well. So she fought me. But it was just, that young, arrogant teenage kid who thinks he knows everything. I read it in a biography and I thought, okay, that's how it's going to work out for everybody. Begging my mom was like, I need to get out of school. I need to start working. I need to go to theater. So because I didn't get a matric, I was told that I need to make this comedy thing work. And that's how I became a comedian. What I'm trying to say is if there's any kids who are listening to this, because I'm not trying to encourage dropping out of school, one thing I realized was to be a comedian that you needed your education and to know a lot of stuff that's happening out there in the world. I realized that I needed to go back to school and finish that.
Okay, well, I think that's some very wise words. Your solo show, Come As You Are, did exceptionally well, obviously winning an award. What inspired the name and the content of this tour? And was there a personal story behind it?
Come As You Are, I think I traveled the Middle East, I traveled Africa, I traveled South Africa, and a lot in America. And I realized that a lot of people are the same. If you listen to the news or if you listen to what most governments around the world say, you think that most people hated each other. But when you actually meet people, individuals, everywhere you go, you realize how similar we are as human beings. And that's where the name actually comes from. Just come as you are. That's more than you need. We don't need anything else to get along, to be special, to vibe with each other. Just come as you are. That's literally what the name means. And we're going to figure this thing out together. I realized just having that show and traveling with it and seeing the way people connect, the more vulnerable I was on stage, the more vulnerable and open people were in the audience. I think as human beings, we keep things to ourselves, but once we see one open up, it makes a lot of us feel better or heal or whatever the word is you're looking for, or just sometimes just laugh at each other, whether we agree with the jokes or not. So that's where it comes from, where the whole name comes from.
So if I hear you correctly, international audiences sort of respond very similarly to your comedy compared to those back home.
Yeah, I think it all depends. You just need to find your person. If you look at politics around the world, they are very similar characters. Donald Trump, it's not the first time we've seen a Donald Trump. When it comes to political leaders, they all kind of duplicate themselves. And the problems that we face in South Africa, we've got those problems everywhere else. So you just need to figure it out. I was in Istanbul recently, and they were firing the mayor. South Africa, we have enough stories about people getting fired.
Especially mayors.
Exactly, especially mayors. So you realize, like, we complain a lot as South Africans about stuff, but we're not that bad. We're actually doing very well.
So do you find it easy to balance that being very brutally honest and hilarious at the same time, especially when it's topics that hit home hard for South Africans?
I think it's the way you say anything. Like, I speak about some tough subjects on stage, but I think it's the way you do everything. Comedy is pretty much flirting. The only difference is you're flirting with 200 people at a time and not one person. Put it this way, if you were on a date with a person, you wouldn't tell them about your parents' divorce in the first 5 minutes. You're going to first offer them a drink, do the easier jokes. Which school did you go to? And then maybe like minute 50, like, actually, my parents are divorced. And how about yours? You know what I mean? So,
Right.
So you're just trying to get to know people all at one go.
Well, I'm chatting to comedian Robby Collins. He won big at the 12th Annual Savanna Comics Choice Comedy Awards. He walked away with Best Solo Show and Headliner of the Year. We're going to take a quick break and more with Robby right after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So Robby Collins walked away with the Best Solo Show and Headliner of the Year at the 12th Annual Savanna Comics Choice Comedy Awards. Before the break, Robby touched on kind of how he got into the career and also some of the learnings he's had with traveling with comedy around the world and how we're all not that different. We all have very similar things that make us laugh and possibly also make us cry. Robby, how have you seen the South African comedy scene change? I mean, we've had a lot of comedy clubs disappear during COVID and sadly they haven't come back. And surely that must have an impact on existing comedians, but also new talent.
That's a very interesting question because on Saturday I had a whole long debate with a couple comics about the Joburg scene. When I moved up to Johannesburg in 2010, it was an extremely hopeful year for South Africans. Things were popping up everywhere. We had the World Cup. I think the cities have changed. I'm from Durban originally, and I think Cape Town has had an extremely big boom after COVID, and COVID forced a lot of people, because Johannesburg is a melting pot of people from all over the country, the continent. And I think a lot of people realized with COVID that they can work from home. A lot of people haven't come back into the city the way I think they were before COVID. So the comedy clubs just aren't happening as much in Johannesburg. In Cape Town, the scene has actually grown because of how the tourism is happening. It's interesting how Joburg is facing challenges on the comedy scene and I think the live music scene at the moment. But I also think that there's a lot of young comics that have learned enough that are now going to invest and start trying to put up comedy clubs, because there are a lot of gigs. We just need somebody to invest and get a comedy club going.
Well, it's certainly a lucrative business from what I've seen as an outsider. I think every time there is a comedy show in whatever shape or form, I think South Africans flock to it. And I think it's also a bit of therapy for the nation that is needed on a regular basis.
100%. But I think there's something with South Africans that needs to happen. I think that people just need to get into the habit of buying tickets for people they don't know. And that's something that you see in other places of the world where nightlife is different, and I get that transport is different in South Africa, but people will just go to a comedy show simply because they want to watch a stand-up comedy show. And I think that's growing, but not growing fast enough. I think the culture of seeing live entertainment, live music should become a thing, because people go out for shows, but you need to be able to go out to a show even if you don't know the name of the comedian. Same way you'd go to the club if you don't know the DJ's name. It needs to just be a thing of, let's go watch comedy tonight. And that's the only way it will grow and get bigger and bigger.
And I think as South Africans, we're actually quite spoilt. I mean, having traveled overseas recently and bought some tickets to some live shows, my goodness. I mean, you can literally take the rand value that we would pay here and put a pound or a euro sign in front of it, and that's what you're going to be paying. So not 250 rand, but 250 euros. And you're going to have the most uncomfortable seat with probably some of the worst food you've ever had for that luxury. So we're getting a really good deal in South Africa.
And also, Alex, in all honesty, I think South African comedians are some of the best in the world. And I'm not even just saying that. I think we really do have a natural talent. And even South Africans in general, I'm not even talking comedians. I think South Africans as human beings are extremely funny people who laugh at things that the average person anywhere else would not find funny. We're a funny nation. From politics to average teacher or nurse, or whatever, you're going to get humor out of us. And I think that's just a natural thing that we have, whether it has something to do with our past or the stuff we've gone through together. We definitely have a sense of humor that I have not seen anywhere else before.
No, listen, I absolutely agree with you. And I often see these international comedy festivals that have been hosted locally, and then they say, oh, there's some internationals coming from Canada or the US or the UK. And I often already, before I've even seen the guy, I already feel bad for him because I know he's going to have an uphill battle competing with some of our local voices and our local talents because, you know, we just hit differently and it just, we just have a different sense of humor that I think also just absolutely, you know, punches above its weight. Coming back to your award, what does it mean now having won these awards? Is it the same way that if artists win awards internationally that it puts you in a different price bracket or a different demand bracket? And does it also put pressure on you to have to now really up your game or at least keep the standard that you've had so far?
I think my rate card definitely changes some way. I need to look at that. You know, I think when it comes to these things, I feel like you got to just keep doing what you're doing. I think a big thing that I've seen with people who win awards, and I'm going, whether it's locally or internationally, I think a lot of people start changing different things or changing the recipe. I think you can doing bigger things, and that's what I'm looking into right now, and taking the show in different places of the world. But otherwise, I'm going to be at the comedy club and working out the material. I think that's a very important thing as comedians. If you only leave the house when you're getting a paycheck, you're going to become very average. And that's what I always tell young comedians. Like, if you only think you're going to learn when people are paying your gig, you're going to fall behind and become extremely average. You got to be out there at comedy clubs asking them, can I do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just working on material. So you make sure you're prepared. It's just about the grind and doing it and having fun, because we've chosen a profession where you don't have a boss. I think the most important thing to do is have fun and enjoy it. And whatever else comes with it, the awards, that's cool. I'm very grateful to be recognized by my industry. But at the end of the day, I also know that there are so many great comics out there whose names could have been called out. But I'm just going to have fun with it. That's all I'm doing.
Well, let's see what happens, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with you, Robby, after this award, and of course seeing you perform again, hopefully soon in Johannesburg. And if you get a chance to see Robby Collins live, make sure that you get yourself a ticket, get yourself a seat, and strap yourself in for the ride. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and thanks so much for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate it.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So taking you into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner, and if there's anything that sounded really interesting, you didn't get the details, you didn't catch the names, or you need some further reading or some further links, well, hop onto the website, sandtontimes.co.za, check out the show notes, and we'll put the details up there for you. So if you want to go through that in your own time and pick up on something that you heard, please do so. Also check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times, which you can follow at any time on your preferred social media channel. And of course, there's also the exclusive WhatsApp line 084 Sandton, which is 084 726 3866, 084 726 3866, and make use of that if you want to send some voice notes, some text messages, and participate with your media. Well, it's that time of the show again when we turn to our entertainment commentator, Tat Wolfen. And Tat, I picked up something very interesting over this time of the year, especially with Easter, obviously being a religious holiday as well, that some of the cinemas have been showing a snippet, call it, or a part of a series that's been very popular online and has been gaining momentum over 5 seasons called The Chosen. And they showed the Last Supper episodes. I think it's 2 of them or a few of them from season 5. But quite interesting to see how this kind of faith-based cinema has been of great interest.
Firstly, hi, and it's good to be back. Yeah, the cinemas have actually been showing the whole series. It's not just now. They have been showing since episode 1. Certainly, I know the new metros have.
It's fascinating how faith-based cinema has taken off.
Do you know? I find it very interesting because Hollywood in general is not only not religious, but they have been sort of actively anti-religious for some years, I think, you know, to the point of making snide remarks and all that kind of thing. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I respect everyone's chosen path in life. And, you know, I think you need to do what fulfills you and what makes your life complete. And I'm a huge supporter of faith-based cinema because there's a whole sort of movement in Hollywood spearheaded by a studio called Angel Studios, but there are other studios as well. And they don't only make religion-based movies, but they make movies that are family values-based, which I think is very important as well. You know, because, again, to come back to what Hollywood's been doing in recent decades, the movies tend to be sort of anti-family. The parents are stupid. The kids are disrespectful. Generally speaking, Hollywood does not value the family unit. And these faith-based studios are making movies in that direction. And guess what? The public's responding in their droves. I mean, the other day you were telling me a very interesting statistic about the series The Chosen, which is essentially the story of the life of Christ. Just tell me those statistics again. I found them very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just to contextualize this, I mean, for those people who've never heard of The Chosen, it's a freely available series. Like you highlighted, it's a fresh new take and a reimagined idea of what the life and ministry of Jesus Christ was like. But the stats I found was that over 300 million people have watched the series worldwide, which I think is an unbelievable amount of people. Considering
That's
that this
incredible.
entire thing was financed via crowdfunding initially, they managed to raise $10 million to do the first season. We're now into season 5. It's been translated into 50 languages, but what's most interesting is that a third of the people who've watched this, and this is according to the Financial Times, are non-religious. So we're talking about 100 million people who have watched this series that really don't identify as Christian or as any sort of faith.
I think that's really astonishing, which just shows you that there's a call for those kinds of movies, and that, you know, because the general thinking has been like, oh yeah, you know, if you make movies that are violent and profane and full of
Skopskiet and Donner.
Let's say couplings, because this is family radio. Yeah. And the general thinking has been that, you know, this is what people want to see. But actually, there are people out there who want to see things of, you know, that are maybe faith-based and also that are rooted in tradition and in family values. So I think that's really great. I think it's an incredible movement, and it's obviously meeting a call, because there are so many Hollywood movies recently, and you know that don't really push traditional values, that have been sinking like lead balloons, one after the other. And you would think that these Hollywood execs who make millions of dollars every year in salaries, you would think that they would sit down at their board meetings and go, why aren't people coming to see these movies? And I'm not going to name which particular studio, but there's one studio that I have in mind that always blames the audiences. No, sorry, dude. If you're making shoes and no one's buying your shoes, maybe you make lousy shoes. You know, maybe it's time to sit down and look at your product.
Tat, I think I had a maths teacher like that once. I kept blaming the class and maybe not her teaching. But moving along, what's interesting about these movies as well is the model they've come up around it, because a lot of these are not getting your big studio funding, like you highlighted. I mean, even some of the Angel Studios productions are all funded by either individuals or small businesses or people who are all giving a little bit here and there. And they're managing to get these productions made. They're made exceptionally well. I mean, from what I've seen of The Chosen, and I'm yet to start watching a few of the episodes, the quality of the acting, the lighting, the sound, the whole setup is really well done, to the point that I believe they've even put together a group of experts to put this series together, including Messianic rabbis, Catholic priests, New Testament scholars, a Jewish advisory board, and so on, to make sure that the dialogue, the storyline, the way the story is told from different perspectives is followed accurately. And they've got the results, I suppose, to prove that was a very good approach.
I find that really interesting. What that also does is it brings people together, because we're living in a culture where we're being taught to hate one another because of religious difference, because of color difference, whatever, and here you have, as you say, rabbinical experts and Christian experts getting together to tell the story, instead of being in separate camps. And you were talking about the quality as well. I don't know, did you see Cabrini, which was the story of that nun in the early days of New York, who established an orphanage for all these kids who were parentless?
Yeah, we had the producer on a couple of episodes ago. It's somewhere in the archive.
You talk about production values. The production values on Cabrini were just out of this world. They were stunning. And it was such a beautiful, moving film. And you didn't have to be Christian to appreciate her Christian values, and how she fought all the political forces that weren't interested in helping her. It was really, I thought it was inspirational. In fact, whilst I'm telling you about it, I'm getting goosebumps. Beautiful movie. It's so good to see movies that affirm human values and not, I'm probably just as guilty as you are in that occasionally we like to see a skorpskieten donder, where there's people shooting at one another and chaos and mayhem and
mindless dialogue.
Yes, yeah. But we don't want to live in that world. You know what I mean? It should be something that you sort of, okay, well, tonight I feel like something mindless. I've had a really hectic day at work. I just feel like watching a skorpskieten donder. I don't want to be in that headspace all the time. And to see something like Cabrini can inspire you. So I'm way in with that. I'm really way in with faith-based cinema. It's quality stuff. The values are all there, and I look forward to more stuff from them, really.
Well, if that whets your appetite, we're going to put up some of the things we spoke about on the website if you might want to do some viewing or some further reading. And some of these platforms also have their own streaming opportunities. And Tat Wolfen, our entertainment commentator for the Sandton Times, a very appropriate conversation for this week. And thanks again for making the time.
And I shall speak to you soon.
Follow the Sandton Times on social media.
Sandton Times.
So, video of a hit-and-run incident that occurred in Rivonia in Sandton at the beginning of April, not that long ago, has gone viral online this past week. And this disturbing incident is now under investigation by the police. And we have an eyewitness to the incident. She's a writer and communications strategist, Sarah Britten. And Sarah, thank you for making time to chat to me on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So, Sarah, you unfortunately became party to this entire incident as it unfolded, but let me get it in your own words.
So it was a very boring Saturday afternoon, the 5th of April. It was nice weather. I was driving home. I had my 9-year-old daughter in the back seat reading her new Wimpy Kid book. And I was driving up a road I've driven up probably hundreds of times before, 12th Avenue in Rivonia, heading towards Rivonia Road. As I went up the hill, I saw this really strange sight, and I thought, what am I seeing? Is this real? And I noticed a dark gray bucky literally bouncing over a person, riding over this person deliberately. And so the front wheels sort of bounced over him, and then the back wheels bounced over him, and then this vehicle roared off. And it must have happened in a couple of seconds. It dawned on me what I'd witnessed. So I quickly turned to the left into Autumn Lane, which runs parallel to Rivonia Road. I stopped the car on the pavement, and by now I was shaking and I was trying to call an ambulance, and I accidentally called my husband instead. And I said, "Oh, I think I've just witnessed an attempted murder. Please call an ambulance." And then I cut the call. I jumped out of the car. I locked it, and I went to look at the victim, who by now was lying in the road just beyond the stop street on Autumn Road. So he was literally lying in 12th Avenue. And if you've looked at this video that's gone so massively viral, I arrived after this video was filmed. So what I saw was the culmination of it, when the victim had by now, I don't know whether he had staggered towards the stop street, or this vehicle had, by trying to run him over, had pushed him that way. But I saw him in 12th Avenue in front of me. I called my husband accidentally, who called an ambulance. I jumped out of the car. I was shaking. I locked it. And I went over to check how the guy was doing. And I went to check if he was still alive, and he was moving. So I spoke to him. I said, "Have you called the police? Have you called the police?" Nobody knew the number to call the police. Yeah, that was my first impression.
Wow. I mean, it's quite crazy, because I think when you initially see something like this unfold, you either think you're not seeing this correctly, or there is an accident that's happened, so someone's been mistakenly driven over or hit by a car. But if you watch this video, and I mean, if you're sensitive, I encourage you not to do it. But if you have seen it, it is very deliberate, and it is relentless. I mean, to the point that this person in this bakkie was clearly trying to achieve something that was, at the end of the day, quite detrimental to the victim.
Oh, yeah. No, it was very targeted. He wanted to kill him. And I'm actually, in retrospect, with the power of hindsight, I'm surprised he lived as long as he did. Because when I witnessed the bakkie driving over him, I didn't know what had happened prior to that. So I arrive, stop, lock the car, check on the victim, ask if anyone's called the police. I then went back to my car, jumped back in, called my husband again, because he wanted to check on the address to send the ambulance. And of course, and even though I know it's 12th Avenue in Rivonia, I was panicking and I was in so much shock that I suddenly doubted myself. So I had to think, which road am I in? Which road am I in? And I then got out of my car again and went back to check on how the victim was doing. And by that time, there was another witness there.
Yeah.
And this was the witness who filmed the video that has gone viral. And he saw the whole thing. And yeah, I had some interesting exchanges with him.
Yeah. Well, look, it's interesting, and I want to get into those exchanges in a second, but I think one of the things that you also pointed out, you did a bit of a post on social media about this, is this automatic reaction that we have when we see this kind of thing unfold, is to pull out our cell phones and to either start taking photos and either start taking videos, which in some instances you think, well, is that really the right reaction to have? But at the same time, it's this kind of media now that is bringing attention and is documenting and is potentially acting as evidence in a situation that might have purely had to rely on eyewitnesses that could have pieced this together in their imagination.
Yeah, exactly. You raise a very good point. And my first instinct when I got out of my car was to put my camera on and to record, because, we all watch true crime. We all watch, endless Netflix shows. And I didn't know what had happened. And I wanted to make sure that whatever I was witnessing, there was some sort of impartial witness to that in the form of my phone. And I posted it without thinking, I sent it to X and I said, "I'm shaking. I think I've just witnessed an attempted murder." And I sent it there, partly because I thought, having backup evidence is important. But part of me has been thinking since then, was I aiming for clout? Was I? Some people have said to me, having seen this video, why didn't the guy who filmed intervene? Why did he just sit there taking a video? And I remember saying to him at the time, I said, "I'm really grateful that you managed to get this, that you managed to get the evidence that could nail this guy, because if it were not for you, this man would have been found lying dead in the street and nobody would have known why. And yeah, it's this dichotomy of the, ubiquitous videos everywhere. Everyone has a video camera in their hand. And I admitted to my shame on LinkedIn that when the paramedics arrived and they started working on him, my first instinct was to film this, because, that's what you do. And one of the paramedics called out very sharply and said, "No video." And I suddenly, I jumped out of the zone. I was shocked and I felt really bad about it. And I ended up, just prior to that, I'd actually helped turn the victim over. He was lying on his stomach in the road, and the paramedics needed to turn him over in order to try and perform CPR. So they got one of the other witnesses, and I helped with his feet. And I remember seeing his gray socks, and one of the other witnesses held up a drip. So they put a drip in him, and then they performed CPR.
Sure.
And I remember watching them lift up his shirt, and he had this tattoo on his left pec of, a diagram of a heart where his real heart is. And they were pumping away, working. And the other witness said to me he didn't think he would make it because he'd seen how many times the guy had ridden over him. And I remember saying to him, I'm just staying long enough to work out, did I just witness an attempted murder or a murder? The paramedics called it. They put the foil blanket over him. By that time, I'd spoken to a couple of witnesses and asked them what was going on. I'd run out to the corner of Rivonia Road and 12th and waved my arms like a crazy woman trying to flag down the ambulance because the ambulance went to the wrong address. And the cops also weren't sure because, of course, 12th Avenue crosses over Rivonia. They weren't sure which side to go. So I remember standing with these other guys gesticulating in a crazy way to get the cops to turn across the traffic and go down to the Bryanston side of 12th Avenue rather than the Rivonia side. And the cops arrived, and the other witness said to them, I was tracking the guy, I was trailing the guy, and I called your call center. Your call center is useless. So, yes, the other witness, the one who took that video, actually chased that guy when he drove off and tried to keep up with him.
Wow.
And he called the cops and said, because he was trying to get them to track this guy. And, of course, they didn't. And as we now know, he has not been caught. I believe the vehicle was found abandoned in Sophia Town. This guy's on the run, and who knows, he's probably skipped the country by now.
Sure.
So my main aim would be, can we get justice? You can't do stuff like this. I mean, I know we live in a very violent society, but the fact is the police had the registration number. They know who this guy is, and they still haven't caught him. Who knows where he is? And in a strange way, I'm glad that there's so much hype about this case now, that people have finally cottoned onto it. Because at one point I thought, I just saw this really dreadful thing and nobody cares. I reached out, well, I didn't reach out to a journalist. A journalist contacted me asking for comment on a completely different, completely unrelated issue. And I said, oh, by the way, I witnessed a murder on Saturday. And I gave him the details. So the Citizen reported on it a week ago. And then it went quiet. Nobody else in the media picked it up. And I thought, okay, well, this is just going to be swept under the carpet. It's just one of those things that happened. And then suddenly I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw a report about a hit and run. And I thought, wow, that's familiar. I'd just seen something like that. And it took me a moment or two to register that what I was seeing was what I had witnessed. It's been wild to watch how this has gone so massively viral. 10 days after the fact, it's taken so long for it to reach the public consciousness. And yeah, I'm hoping against hope that they catch the guy. I don't have much hope that they will, but I'm glad that it is getting the attention that it deserves.
Well, Sarah Britten, she witnessed this hit and run, and if you've seen the video, that's a little bit of the background story or a bit of an additional narrative to that. And Sarah, I agree with you. I hope that we find the perpetrator in this entire thing, and of course, a very sad ending to the person who was the victim of this incident. And thank you so much for making the time to jump on the Sandton Times Hour and to share that background story.
Thank you so much, Alex.
And on that note, it's time to wind it all up on the Sandton Times Hour for this week. As always, available as a podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or any other leading digital audio platform of your choice. Feel free to send through your questions, your comments, and your feedback on editor@sandtontimes.co.za. If you want to choose email, on social media @Sandton Times, on the website sandtontimes.co.za, or connect on WhatsApp on 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866, and use that for your voice notes, text messages, and other media. Thank you to our guests who made time to be on the show this week, and of course also the team that even works over public holidays and at the most bizarre times of the day to make sure everything works smoothly for your entertainment. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the short week. Freedom Day next week, I believe, but we have something very special lined up for you, so make sure you're back again. Check in with the Sandton Times Hour, and God willing, we'll do it all again then.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.